Tonight on the Worldview Report, President Trump demands that a candidate for Virginia Attorney General resign. That's over a series of text messages in which the candidate said he wanted a state lawmaker murdered. New tariffs are announced on heavy trucks and other goods coming into the United States. We'll share the details. No-go zones for ICE agents are happening in major cities. And you bet, as the confrontation between the White House and blue states intensifies, it's going to grow worse. And President Trump now says he's decided to allow Ukraine to use American-made Tomahawk cruise missiles against Russia. But he's waiting to deliver the missile system until he's assured of what targets in Russia will be hit. We'll expose how this escalates the Russia-NATO war in Europe to dangerous levels. All these stories and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brannon Howse. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family, Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brannon Howse.
Good evening, and welcome to the Worldview Report. Leading off tonight, President Trump publicly demanded that Jay Jones, the Democratic nominee for Virginia Attorney General, withdraw from the race. That's after damning text messages resurfaced. The messages include vivid and violent language aimed at a sitting Republican leader, making this more than just a tone problem. For many voters, an Attorney General candidate fantasizing about murder, well, it crosses a line that the ballot box must address. The text, they were originally sent in August of 2022, and they were reported to reference then House Speaker Todd Gilbert in brutal terms. One message, it read exactly, quote, 3 people, 2 bullets, Gilbert, Hitler, and Pol Pot. Gilbert gets 2 bullets to the head, end quote. Those words would seem to cross the line of acceptability from anyone running for a statewide legal office who would supervise law enforcement and legal policy, right? In fact, reports said the messages also allegedly included statements wishing harm on Gilbert's children, which makes the conduct even more shocking. Whether meant as a joke or not, threats and fantasies about harming public officials and their families, they are not acceptable political rhetoric. This isn't creative hyperbole. It's a disqualifying pattern of thought for anyone asking to be the Commonwealth's top law enforcement officer, don't you think? President Trump, he captured the outrage in blunt terms when he wrote on his Truth Social account, quote, "It has just come out that the radical left lunatic Jay Jones, who is running against Jason Myers, the great attorney general in Virginia, made sick and demented jokes, if they were jokes at all, which were not funny, and that he wrote down and sent around to people concerning the murdering of a Republican legislator, his wife, and their children," end quote. Republican leaders across the state and nation, they joined President Trump in calling for accountability, insisting that Jones step aside. Vice President J.D. Vance, Governor Glenn Youngkin, and House Speaker Mike Johnson all publicly urged Jones to withdraw. That unified Republican pressure, well, it highlights how seriously conservatives view threats against public servants and their families. And yet, there are no such calls from the left. It's crickets. I'm not aware of a single high-profile Democrat who has called on Jones to drop out. In fact, I would suggest the demands from the right will just make Jones more popular within the base of these radical leftists. You see, that's how the left-wing paradigm works. The U.S. is imposing an additional import tariff on foreign-made heavy trucks entering the country. That's what President Trump said on Monday. The new tariffs, they will go into effect on November 1st. President Trump said in a post to his Truth Social account, quote, "Beginning November 1st, 2025, all medium and heavy-duty trucks coming into the United States from countries will be tariffed at the rate of 25%. Thank you for your attention to this matter," end quote. The announcement comes a day before Trump is set to host Prime Minister Mark Carney at the White House. That happened today. Last week, Trump had reiterated a past vow that he would put import tariffs of 100% on pharmaceutical drugs, 50% on kitchen cabinets and bathroom vanities, 30% on unupholstered furniture, and 25% on heavy, trucks, starting all on October 1st. While Trump did not provide a legal justification for the tariffs, he said on Truth Social that the taxes are imported kitchen cabinets and sofas, and they were needed, quote, for national security and other reasons, end quote. Under the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, the administration launched a Section 232 investigation in April about the impacts on national security from pharmaceutical drug and truck imports. The Commerce Department launched an investigation into timber and lumber back in March. So it's unclear whether the furniture tariffs stem from that. The Chicago mayor, Brandon Johnson, announced on Monday that he has signed an executive order creating, quote, ICE-free zones, end quote, within the city, banning ICE agents from city property. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson signed the executive order on Monday prohibiting federal immigration agents from using city-owned property for immigration enforcement operations. That's as the Trump administration deploys the National Guard there to Illinois. Johnson established the so-called ICE-free zones and then referred to U.S. immigrant and custom enforcement as part of his Protecting Chicago initiative, rejecting President Trump's crime crackdown on deportations that's being rolled out in the city. Johnson said during the news conference on Monday, this, watch.
Today, we are signing an executive order aimed at reining in this out-of-control administration. The order establishes ICE-free zones. That means that city property and unwilling private businesses will no longer serve as staging grounds for these raids.
As Chicago seeks to thwart ICE's deportation efforts, Johnson and the Illinois governor, J.B. Pritzker, filed a lawsuit on Monday attempting to block the Trump administration from deploying National Guard troops to Illinois. During his remarks, Johnson made the absurd accusation that the extreme right has refused to accept the results of the Civil War. That was, of course, when slavery was abolished. He added, quote, they have repeatedly called for a rematch, but in the coming weeks, we will use this opportunity to build greater resistance. Chicagoans are clear that militarizing our troops in our city as justification to further escalate a war in Chicago will not be tolerated. The right wing in this country wants a rematch of the Civil War, end quote. That's what Johnson said during his press conference. And he said Chicago would, quote, not tolerate ICE agents violating our residents' constitutional rights, end quote, or the Trump administration's disregard for local authority. Of course, the issue is, how do illegal aliens and gangbangers and international drug cartels have any constitutional rights at all? I wonder if Johnson has even considered that. Johnson has directed Chicago agencies and departments to identify spaces within the next 5 days that have been targeted during ICE raids and to post a clear message to federal immigration officers that the city-owned property would not be used for immigration enforcement, including as a staging area, processing location, or operations base. Quote, if the federal government violates this executive order, we will take them to court, end quote. That's what Johnson said, urging President Trump to leave Chicago the blank alone, end quote. Pritzker, long considered a potential 2028 presidential candidate, said on Sunday that he refused to comply with the Trump administration's ultimatum to deploy Illinois National Guard troops, calling it, quote, absolutely outrageous and un-American. We must now start calling this what it is, Trump's invasion, end quote. That's what the governor said. Here's how President Trump's deputy chief of staff, Stephen Miller, responded to the Chicago mayor's new policy. Watch this.
I was asked the question of, well, do you have any example that this behavior hasn't been condemned by Democrat officials? Well, I can go one better. The mayor of Chicago not only has failed to condemn the violent obstructive acts against ICE and law enforcement, but in the aftermath of 2 coordinated attempted murders of ICE officers through vehicle ramming attacks, he issued a no-go zone for ICE officers. What do we think would happen if, say, under a Democrat administration, Republican officials declared no-go zones for the FBI? What do you think the reaction to that would be? How many people do you think would be arrested and placed into jail over that? And so it's just important to understand these are not isolated incidents. If you can't see, then you don't want to see. In other words, if you can't see that since we've taken office, there has been a organized, systematized campaign to delegitimize, dehumanize, threaten, impede, obstruct, and physically assault ICE officers in the conduct of their duties, then I can't persuade you of it because you're choosing not to see what's right in front of your face.
Hello, I'm Brannon Howse. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now, and we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization highlights in a new report that high food prices continue to persist worldwide, citing data that shows a fivefold increase across many countries. This exponential increase makes conditions ripe for social unrest, particularly in developing or politically fragile countries. Bloomberg analyzed the data that highlighted adverse weather conditions in many of the world's top farm belts are resulting in declining harvest yields. Geopolitical tensions drove up diesel and gasoline prices, and that exerted a broader inflationary impact on production cost. The global phenomenon of excessive money printing, well, that has also been the driver of inflation. The report indicates that 50% of countries in North America and Europe experienced abnormally high food prices in 2023 when compared to the average between 2015 and 2019. And it's only gotten worse in 2024 and this year, 2025. The report suggests that when food inflation outpaces income growth, that begins the countdown clock of when social instabilities emerge. President Trump on Sunday said he would bomb Iran again if the country restarts its nuclear program, warning that the U.S. was, quote, not going to wait so long this time, end quote. A threat that comes amid growing signs that another U.S.-Israeli war against Iran may be coming. Quote, the B-2s, what they did, those beautiful flying wings, what they did, they hit every single target. And just in case, we shot 30 Tomahawks out of a submarine, end quote. That's what President Trump said in a speech at the Naval Station Base there in Norfolk, Virginia. That was during a celebration of the U.S. Navy's 250th birthday. He was, of course, referring to the U.S. bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities on June of, 2022, this year. Quote, they were going to have a nuclear weapon within a month, end quote. That's what President Trump told a crowd of U.S. Navy sailors. And then he added, quote, and now they can start the operation all over again. But I hope they don't because we'll have to take care of that too if they do. I let them know that. You want to do that? It's fine, but we're going to take care of that and we're not going to wait so long, end quote. President Trump went on to say that he had B-2 pilots visit him in the Oval Office who said the U.S. had been working on plans to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities for 22 years, but that no president before him wanted to do it. The president has previously acknowledged that he bombed Iran on behalf of Israel. He said in an interview with the Daily Caller that was published on September 1st, quote, look, nobody has done more for Israel than I have, including the recent attacks with Iran, wiping that thing out, end quote. Since the ceasefire ended, 12-day U.S.-Israeli war on Iran, Trump, well, he has threatened to bomb Iran again. He's threatened it several times. At the same time, the Trump administration is demanding that Iran enter negotiations to give up its nuclear enrichment program and place limits on its ballistic missiles. Those are demands that the Iranian officials have flatly rejected. So, given the two sides are digging in their heels, well, it appears, at least right now, that the U.S. will be going to war before all is said and done when it comes to Iran. Representative of Louisiana, Senator John Kennedy, said on Fox Business on Monday that Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer will ultimately be forced to engineer an off-ramp to end the ongoing government shutdown. The government shutdown continues after Schumer led most Democrats in voting down the Republicans' spending bill. That was early on Wednesday morning. Appearing on Fox, Kennedy said the shutdown has little to do with policy disputes and everything to do with Schumer's political standing with his caucus. Watch this.
Trump could do likewise, but it's not personal for me, but I don't like almost anything that Chuck Schumer is doing. I don't like it. I mean, it's a direct contrast. He wants to move the country in the wrong direction.
I don't hate anybody.
Neither do I.
And I know you don't. And when I say my prayers, I ask God, don't let me hate. I don't hate Chuck. Senator Schumer, I know him well. This shutdown's not about policy. It's about politics. And Senator Schumer, this is what's going on. He is trying to get the loon wing, the socialist wing of the Democratic Party, which is in control, to love him. And they will never love him. They won't. He'd be better off doing what he did back in March, and just calling it like he saw it and keeping government open. Because what he's saying, we're going to keep government shut down until you, the Republicans, and President Trump give the Democrats $1.5 trillion, and they're going to tell us how to spend it.
We just had John Thune on, Majority Leader of the Senate, who said we can't do that.
And we're not going to do that.
You cannot do that.
We're not going to. I mean,
and Schumer has to know that.
And he does know that.
Yeah.
And let me tell you how this will end. It will end eventually when Senator Schumer goes to 6 or 8 of his members and the Democrats and says, do me a favor, vote to open it back up. I may have to criticize you. I'm not going to vote with you, but I need a way out of this. I need an offer.
That's the offer.
And that's what's going to happen. But he's got to be careful, because if it looks contrived, he's blown it. And he can't look like he's having a mutiny.
Well, now it is time for our nightly Worldview Report commentary. President Trump said on Monday he has, quote, sort of made a decision, end quote, on sending long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine for use against Russia. Tomahawks can strike targets deep inside Russia, including Moscow. President Trump was asked about it by a reporter, and here's his response.
Made a decision on whether to supply Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine or sell them to NATO and let them sell them to Ukraine.
Yeah, I sort of made a decision, pretty much, if you consider. Yeah, I think I want to find out what they're doing with them.
Yes.
Where are they sending them, I guess. I'd have to ask that question.
Trump's answer suggests that he will allow Zelensky's government, which is losing the war badly, to use the U.S.-made cruise missiles to be fired at Russian energy infrastructure and against its military-industrial factories, but not against the Kremlin or other government sites frequented by, well, Russia's top leaders. So we have another major escalation. Another new weapon system will be delivered to Ukraine. Because what Zelensky wants, Zelensky eventually seems to get, right? There is a pattern here. And each new weapons transfer, well, it seems to be more lethal and more powerful than the one before. Russian President Putin, he said just last week he did not think President Trump would approve of Zelensky's request for Tomahawk missiles for use against his country. Putin indicated that if Trump were to grant the request, it would be the final nail in the coffin of U.S.-Russian relations. Well, now we see that this decision has pretty much been made. The neocons, they appear to win again. There are simply just too many of them around the president, and they have his ear. And this is why we've been predicting here for a very long time that Americans will get drawn into a war. In fact, we already are. And unless there's a dramatic shift in strategy, well, it's just a matter of time before we see boots on the ground there in full-fledged combat with Russian soldiers. I pray that day never comes. President Trump has said he is disappointed with Putin because he's not making peace. And he has at least twice in recent days described Russia as a paper tiger for failing to quickly defeat Ukraine. But last week, Putin hit back, questioning if NATO was not the paper tiger for failing to stop Russia's advance. So it sounds like two schoolyard bullies are about to square off, does it not? And clearly neither one is ready to back down. And that's a loss for the world. Because each has weapons that are capable of wiping out scores and scores of people. Almost no Americans and no Russians want to go to war with each other. At least not anyone with their sanity intact. But apparently we have leaders that do want war. At least they're willing to risk it. And for what? Is Ukraine really worth risking our entire national existence? I don't think so. And all President Trump has to do is to view this problem through the lens of his own slogan, America First. America First. Where is our national interest in this whole issue? That's something to think about. Well, that does it for this edition of the Worldview Report. As always, thank you for tuning in and for supporting the program so we can keep pushing it out free of charge. You can do that by supporting our foundation, worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. You'll find our mailing address on the website if you prefer to support us through the mail. Don't forget, our foundation also sponsors our Sunday night church service where I'm teaching through the book of Revelation, verse by verse. I'm in Revelation chapter 21. I'm a few verses in. Revelation only has 22 chapters, so we're almost done. And they're all available for you to watch free of charge as a ministry of our foundation and our network. You can find all 48 lessons that are there right now with more to come at lastdaysstudy.com. 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 Again, brought to you in part by our foundation. So thank you for your support right now. We need it now more than ever, folks, to keep pushing out all this free content. Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. So next time, I'm Brannon Howse. May God save America. Take care.